now we're just
Didn't, trying out, I got a tablet for myself. Okay, I'm trying out annotating on it.
Do you like it?
I am liking it. Cool. But it means that I didn't unstaple this like I normally. So we'll see how that happens. Works or doesn't work. Yeah, it's handy having it.
Okay, this meeting of the Board of Education is now called to order. Please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to welcome everyone to our meeting this evening, and we'll get started by approving our agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda as printed? I have one. I would like to add an action item to pass some resolutions of appreciation for our retiring board members. And we'll put that in the action item session. Is that okay with everybody?
Yes.
Okay, very good. All those who approve the agenda as presented, please say aye. Aye. Motion passes, and we'll move on to the superintendent's report.
great. Thank you. Our major report for tonight, we just have one, is the bond project update, and Johnny Edwards will lead with that.
Thank you, Superintendent Beelang, as well as members of the Board of Public Schools Board of Education. We're going to do a furniture presentation. But before we get into that, I just want to share with the board that we're taking the staff of Haverhill and Central Elementary through their school tomorrow after school, after the construction day ends. Central's walkthrough is tomorrow, and Haverhill's walkthrough is on Thursday. Both walkthroughs begin at 4:30, and being in both buildings, staff are really excited and looking forward to seeing the inside of their schools. In terms of Woodland, the construction work is out for bid, and we plan to open the bids on Monday, December 16th. Looking forward to that. And then our third portion is related to our furniture presentation. I'm joined tonight by Shelby Eisminger. She is the senior interior designer, and Paul Henry is the senior furniture designer, both from Tower Kingster. In the audience is Doug Milborn, who's our project manager. We held furniture gallery walks for both staffs. We held one on December 2nd for Central Elementary School, and their teachers had an opportunity to see the presentation that we're going to give you tonight. And then also the following day, December 3rd, we had another gallery walk for the staff at Haverhill. Both events were well attended, and staff had great questions, and they really loved the furniture concepts. And as you get into tonight's presentation, my colleague, Dr. Kelly Jensenius, reminded me of a conversation we had with a student at Haverhill, actually two students. As we were concluding our presentation with the staff, a young lady came up to Dr. Jensenius, and she had a huge smile on her face. And as the interaction went, we asked her about her excitement. Her excitement was about the new school at Haverhill. And Dr. Jensenius asked her, "What's your favorite part of the building?" And she says, "The cafeteria." And we said, "Well, why?" And she said, "Because we'll have circle tables." A few seconds later, another young man came up to us, similar. "What's your favorite part of the building?" "The cafeteria." "And why?" "Because we're going to have circle tables." I think that's a good segue.
Absolutely.
To our furniture presentation tonight. All right.
Thank you, Johnny. I appreciate it. So along that, we could dive into the psychology of table shapes and why circles excite kids, but that's really not why we're here tonight. Exciting nonetheless, and great that our youngest learners and our youngest users are excited by what they're seeing in the small glimpses we're giving them ahead. What is our goal tonight, like Johnny has shared, is to give you the same update we gave staff the last couple of weeks, and then also give you a little more insight into the process we've followed so far and what's next for purchasing furniture. So from a very high level, where we've been, what process did we take, where are we now, and where are we going? Hopefully quite simple. We will share this presentation that has a lot of detail. Please ask any questions. We're happy to answer any you might have and make it as discussion-based as you wish, or we can run through, and if you have questions at the end, we're happy to dive in from there. From that end, we do talk a lot about our process and our goals. So if you'll remember from the architectural project, there were design drivers that you all set in your ed spec. And similarly, we set those goals for furniture. They follow the same vein and the same key principles, but they're more specific to the goals of the furniture itself and how the furniture shapes the interaction of the kids in the building. So from that end, it can be boiled down in 4 simple ideas. Needs to be dynamic and fluid, meaning it is not rigid, it does not limit, and it does not inhibit, right? We want our kids to be able to move. We want things to be able to adapt. Engaging, because we know that sitting in rows and staring forward is not how our learners are learning today, nor should they be. There's a lot more movement, there's a lot more project-based learning, and it's just a very different environment. Forward thinking, because much like we ask the community to invest in 50-year buildings, this furniture may not last 50 years, but does need to have a very long life cycle and plan for learners who haven't even been born, realistically. And then lastly, collaborative. Not only do our students need to be far more collaborative than ever, but also our teachers and staff do as well. So those are our key goals. We dive into a little more detail in each of those on how we defined those, both with the leadership team as well as with the pilot teachers, which you'll hear a little bit more about from Paul.
So to help validate some of that process and what we're doing, we want to make sure that we're getting the voice of teachers and of students throughout this process. So we put together a process. We started back in November of 22. We started to test fit classrooms and what furniture might fit in those spaces, hear from our leadership team on what their thought process was going to be for the furniture, and start to engage with some of the teachers as well. We talked about the idea of putting together a pilot so that we could actually test furniture out in classrooms for the students to see, for the teachers to see, and get their feedback in that. We started that out in September of 23. Identified what that would look like. In November, we put together those plans. We used the teachers that were identified as pilot teachers to help develop what those classrooms would look like. And then in December, we purchased that furniture, installed that furniture over Christmas break, and then really started the actual pilot process in January of 24. That process included opportunities for us to observe how the students use the furniture, listen to what their thoughts were, what their favorite pieces were, which ones they thought really helped them learn, which ones they also identified as potentially not the best choices to be sitting in, which was great to hear from the students. The teachers gave us their feedback on how easy the furniture was to use in the classrooms. They gave us verbal feedback during interviews. We set up online resources for them to share feedback anonymously as well, so that they didn't feel like they were on the spot giving us that feedback. We met with students and some of our leadership team to get their feedback in small groups. We also had the teachers that were piloting the furniture do presentations to the rest of their teachers at their schools so that they could share how it was using that furniture. Lots of the teachers would see the furniture in the classrooms but not fully understand what was happening. They got to hear the feedback of how it was being used from their cohorts. They weren't hearing it from us or from anybody else. So that was a nice element for them to hear. Once we got through the school year, we compiled those results and then really sat down in earnest with the leadership team and the furniture team to kind of dive into where our solutions are at. We were able to take away key points that helped us validate those 4 bullet points that Shelby talked about at the beginning.
The most important takeaway from our 4th grade students was apparently 4th grade is when back problems start. And we really have the data to back that up now, at least from an experience standpoint. So we learn something new every time, but when you look at chairs, the type of movement that the chairs create, that was a really funny one. It's not actually documented on the summary here. Those are much more research-based, but a fun tidbit to share as we talk about how students were woven into the process from start to finish. This slide is a lot of small text. I apologize. It was set up for our staff gallery where they were able to come up and interact with it on a much larger scale. But ultimately, the goal of this was really that we are looking at the ed spec and changing our environments and changing how both our students and our staff are interacting in those environments. And sometimes a key component of success with that is also establishing new language and new vocabulary and getting on the same page. So of course, staff often ask many, many questions about where is my storage and how can I store it? because for many, many years, resources and resource procurement has been a huge topic for educators and certainly underfunding. So with that, a lot of these FAQ questions that we shared were really just establishing what can I expect at a high level. What does it mean when I say this is a learning community? What does this mean when I say we'll have a kit of parts? Well, really what it means, and what Paul will walk us through in the following slides, are we are not furnishing identical classrooms. We are establishing a whole toolkit that will speak to each grade level or each space. So for example, if we were to have a 4-section building, we are not furnishing 4 identical classrooms. We are furnishing that entire grade level, and our teachers are able to push and pull pieces based on how they're teaching collaboratively. Equal resources, access for all students, but no longer copying and pasting rooms that are honestly less engaging and less stimulating as we're moving from one room to another that might be identical. As I said, kicking this off with the staff, these boards, much like the architectural galleries that I think you all had seen along the way, we're really setting out to highlight for our staff where their input really was able to shine. So the stickies and the what we heard were connecting feedback we heard directly from the staff and from the students of this grade level into how the design and the outcomes were really shaped as a team. Of course, we hit them with very important data. How big are the chairs? How tall are the tables? We want to make sure it fits all of our learners from the youngest to the oldest. But really just starting to give an idea. In this plan, for example, of kindergarten and Y5, everything in the red ink that you're seeing in the first 3 rooms on the left is that kit of parts. So even at first glance, without having to digest the plan or fully understand it, staff were able to get a visual cue that we are able to change this, we are able to move this, but these are not the same, and that's on purpose. And there's purpose behind it.
As we were going through the process, the 2 pilot classrooms that we did were a 2nd grade and a 4th grade classroom, which helped us to inform 2nd and 3rd and 4th and 5th in those pairs. We met separately with 1st and Kinder to get their feedback specifically, and some of the key elements that they had desired to make sure that we were considering as we were putting some of these plans together was making sure that there was plenty of movement in the space, whether it's for the furniture to move out of the way so that students can move around in the space, but also identifying that the movement in the space was not distracting. We kept storage close to the students, so you might see like a table in the upper left has the totes in it right at where the students are working so that they don't have the opportunity to get distracted in the process. They're a little bit more efficient with their time. Shelby mentioned a little bit, but also making sure that the furniture was right-sized, making sure that we have the right-size chairs and desks and seats for the students. It might not be a chair, it might be a floor cushion. It might also be a table that's a little bit taller for students to stand at. But making sure that we are right-sized across the board so that Kinder and Y5 have the smaller furniture that would be a little bit more suited for them. Also things like considering sight lines and making sure that the teachers have the ability to see through the classrooms, knowing that they can set these up in any fashion that they want, making sure that they've got that transparency in the spaces they're going through. When you jump up into 1st grade, again, maintaining that element of movement in space. We're transitioning a little bit as we go through this, so we want to make sure that we're balancing the choices for the students' needs, that we're always considering that we're changing grades with the furniture and building on a little bit of opportunity for them to start to learn and engage in independence, and that independence is going to build some agency for them as they're in the space. We're still considering a lot of things like student transitions as we go through this, but you'll see that we start to move away from some of that on-demand storage and it moves to other parts of the classroom a little bit. Building in a little bit more responsibility for the students as they're transitioning into 2nd and 3rd grade. Those kits, as we start getting into those grades, you can see some examples here. It's still a variety of furniture for a variety of learning styles. We know that not every student learns the exact same way, so we want to make sure that we're supporting them as much as we can and the variety of their learning needs. That the furniture supports the work needs at the same time so that we're not giving them the wrong furniture to work at, even if it's the right furniture for them to learn at. We want to make sure that their work is supported, and then also that we're still encouraging that choice and that student agency in the space. And then once we start getting up into the older studios, giving them more engaging spaces and collaborative settings, building in furniture that's adaptable to the needs of the moment, knowing that some of the older students may be collaborating on the fly rather than taking more instruction from the teachers, and building in more posture support. So jokingly, we talked about the 4th grade back problems. but including spaces for students to stand at and work at, stools to perch at, but also still not losing opportunity for sitting on the floor in the older grades as well. Having some of those opportunities and really building in that whole spread of opportunity for supporting posture.
That was one of the most rewarding things about the pilot. So we were able to do at Haverhill 3 sections of 2nd grade and at Central 4 sections of 4th grade. And with that, a lot of the surprise and reactions, we took what we call a temperature check at the time we kicked off the pilot to at the time we've completed the actual pilot in place. And to hear a lot of the staff react with, I really wasn't sure I'd like that. And after using it, hearing about how there was improvement in engagement or that they were able to surprise themselves with how the different tools, because furniture is a tool, how those improved learning was really, really rewarding, I think, for our team and for the curriculum and leadership team. For 4th and 5th grade, as Paul said, that standing and that stool posture allows for a lot more contained movement and a lot more regulation when we're no longer asking all of our students who maybe are productive wigglers or who fidget to be able to maintain that focus and effort through the day. So you'll notice as we moved from Y5 to 4th and 5th grade that you may see less floor seating and more stool seating as we move through those grades, but still enough flexibility and enough interchangeability that furniture allows for everyone to find a smart spot. And those were words that were coined by the 2nd grade at Haverhill, smart spots. The slides we walked you through initially were really focused on the learning studios or classrooms, because ultimately most of our educators are most highly focused on those spaces. But the change management team at Portage with the coaches has done an amazing job with working through these teachers and understanding that the spaces beyond a studio door or a classroom door are still main course. They are not dessert. We've used those phrases along the way. So we did still share some overall plans. Of course, we're looking at first floor central here right now and helping them start to understand how those toolkits for the grade level learning are then supported by the commons kit of parts or the small group rooms or some of the educator workshops where it's not just looking at classrooms, but again, taking that focus to how the entire building is for learning, not simply classrooms. Flipping through these quickly, we had 1st and 2nd floor for Central, of course, Haverhill as well. So at a high level, when we share these with staff, of course, we get, where's my room? And what's this? And remind me again what storage was in the building package? And all of that's very natural. It comes from excitement, it comes from nervousness, and we're happy to support all of it. At the end of the day, really digesting in these small chunks through these gallery walks as well as through the tours that Johnny mentioned as we kicked off. We're able to walk them through the process without it being so overwhelming on day 1 or upon orientation when they come back to school. So change management being just as important as the design itself in a lot of ways to have that successful first school year.
So the very fun part is getting the prices together for all of the furniture. We submitted our RFQ for furniture to multiple dealers at the beginning of November. They returned their initial information to us right before Thanksgiving, and we are currently in the process of going through and auditing their information. We are looking at likely 3 dealers: Custer, Michigan Office Environments, and Great Lakes Furniture. You can see that several of them have multiple manufacturers that they would be representing and sourcing for us. The highlighted ones represent about 80% of the anticipated total furniture purchase. It's spread out nicely across those 3. It gives the district a minimal amount of dealers for touch points to help manage any kind of warranty issues or concerns as far as that is concerned. We also have all the dealers that are utilizing different national purchasing contracts. So those allow us to go after aggressive discounting with pre-negotiated contracts and also levy additional discounting on delivery and installation and various freight and service costs in that process. Right now, as we're getting through it, we're starting to get a sense of where we stand at this point. We're happy that we are trending under budget at this point, but we are still finalizing. There are definitely some adjustments that all 3 of the dealers will need to make to their quotes, which we are in the process of getting that information back to them this week so that they can start to update that. Our goal is to have a recommendation with numbers for the board at the beginning of January.
in general. That tells you a little bit about what we've done and where we are today. As you can imagine, with all of those kits of parts and many manufacturers, there's quite an audit ahead of us. We're very comfortable with where we are today, which I'd say we have the first initial pass for quantities and making sure the right pieces were specified, complete, so we feel very comfortable. Timeline ahead, just as he mentioned, so we'll have recommendation information early January that will come to you all through Johnny. We're really looking to issue our purchase orders by February. So that's really the timeline ahead with your blessing and recommendation. From then, furniture installation actually begins end of April. So it's coming fast, everyone. So that'll be phased installation of April through July at both buildings, happening with a little bit of an overlap, as you'd expect, which is another advantage of having 3 dealers involved, is they're really able to cover that time and that overlap and that bulk of work, because these are quite large projects and it can be a pretty large undertaking. So that will take place, as I said, April through July, with the ability to complete our punch list or our on-site review and hopefully make any necessary corrections before students and teachers take occupancy for the new school year. So a lot of excitement ahead. We're very, very excited to feel like the feedback that we received from the staff, from the leadership team, and from the ed spec are all coming together in a package that was on budget or below budget. And we're incredibly proud of the work that went in and the compromises that were made and the very, very thoughtful analysis. Not just we want this, but also why do we want it? Not just, I don't like that chair, but what does that chair offer to our learners? I think it was an incredibly thorough process, and we're very, very excited to share it all with you as we move forward.
There's a lot of information. To pause and be able to answer any questions that you may have about either the process or some of the ideas or concepts that you've seen tonight.
Not a question, but an appreciation for how you took into account providing greater inclusion especially for our neurodiverse learners.
Love what we do.
Yeah, thank you for your work. We're really pleased that you're in charge of the process. Some of us who have toured the rooms with the pilot furniture in it, it's just amazing how kids are using furniture. I mean, you know this stuff, but it was all new to some of us, and thank you for your work.
Thank you, and look forward to a recommendation at the turn of the new year.
Thanks, Johnny. Thanks, Dean. The only other thing I'll mention is, I know that Kat Frank usually comes up and during public comment and recognize a few things going on in the district, and I think she shared that with you electronically because she's not able to make it today. So I won't repeat the things that she's already stated, but I will just, kind of bring to your attention and kind of thank our student body for the work they did with Breadlift. Breadlift is a student-operated function that raises money for a cause. This year, the cause went to the C.S. Mott Children's Hospital, and then in particular, I think their pediatric heart transplant department. And between Portage Central, Portage Northern, and some help from Gull Lake, I think about $45,000 was raised towards that efforts. We will be having a ceremonial check presentation on Friday at noon, so any board members that are available to stop by there, and it shouldn't take longer than 15 minutes, but acknowledging the efforts of those people on what ended up being 2 beautiful Saturday afternoons that they had weather-wise. So, yeah, kudos to the kids for doing that. That's all I have on this part.
Very good. Thank you, Mark. We'll move to Board Education, presentation of Monitoring Report 1.1, elementary.
So Kelly Jensenis is here to present that, and just to put it in context, Monitoring Report 1.1 is presented this year over 2 presentations. You heard the first half of the presentation. I don't know if it's appropriate to characterize it as half, but the first portion of the presentation last month that involved our high schools and middle schools. This month we focus on elementary, and this is again the revised end statement that the board has and our revised interpretations, and And hopefully, as you're listening, you're also analyzing, is this kind of the intent of what your policy changes were intended to do differently for us? I mean, obviously, our reports are looking different. The data that we present is different. And Kelly's going to present the elementary part. So,
Well, thank you.
Jay?
I appreciate it. So good evening, Superintendent Delang and trustees. So as Mark said, I'm going to present that new approach to interpreting MR11 by looking at each Portage Public School elementary school's top 10 similar schools across the state. So we get more accurate where our buildings are landing. So this is similar to what we did with high school and middle school, but at the elementary level. So all the information you'll see this evening is pulled from our My School data with criteria based on total enrollment, the economically disadvantaged percentage and demographics, with a cap of that 125% of our highest schools' total per pupil expenditures at each level. And for the sake of MR11, that expenditure is pulled directly from My School data as well, so that you're aware, very similar to what we did earlier in November. And know that this approach eliminates groupings of all schools into one average and provides each school a true apples-to-apples comparison to alike schools that have a similar makeup. The difference here is we have 8 elementaries, so that's where tonight, letting me know and really might have to dig back into it after you hear tonight's presentation and when we come back in January. So we'll see how we do tonight with this. But know that this approach also includes schools compared to our other K-RESA schools as well. So with that, we'll get started there. All right, so we are reporting on the same 3 areas with the addition of K-RESA comparisons, as well as true comparators in the state for proficiency measures. And I want to just do a quick reminder, percent proficient is simply looking at one testing cycle of data, and for us, that's the spring of 2024. So when we look at that data, that's what we're looking at. When we move to percent proficient improvement, this is where we're looking at current scores compared to previous 3-year average to see if we're improving over the past, essentially, is what we're trying to do there. And then when we get to the growth part, that is determined by the percent of Portage Public School students with an SGP of at least 30. And know that remembering that My School data defines average growth of an SGP from 30 to 69, and that above average 70 to 99. So we'll go through that a little bit more, but I think it's good to start with some definitions there. As Dr. Pasco had presented in November, very similar slide here, that the similar schools criteria based on recommendation, really from our Portage schools saying during their district data review, it was hard to compare to those comparator districts. So they really, as we said earlier, more of an apples-to-apple comparison for them. And so we wanted this data to hopefully help them dig a little bit more deeper, talk to those similar schools, and start getting some information there. So know that the slide, the breakdown of criteria and weights, you can see what we're currently doing compared to what we previously did. So just as Dr. Pasco had said. All right, so getting into it, here we go. So we're going to start with our percent proficient in ELA and math, and then move to our percent proficient improvement in ELA and math. So we're going to go ELA math, but we're going to start with just percent proficient for the 2024 school year. So if you want to follow along with in your packets, it's page 28. That would match these graphs, your figures, just so you have that. You'll start to see figure 19 there. And we have 3 categories at the top of that table that you can see. In blue, you see that above expectations, green, at expectations, and then red below expectations. So that really is, if it's from first to third, we're above most. If we're in that 4th to 6th and within our comparators, we're going to be in the middle range. And if we're below, maybe that 7th to the 10th, that's below most of them. So what is different on this report than middle school and high school is when you look at, let's say, Amberley there, that column, that bar there, that's Amberley compared to Amberley similar schools. And Angling, that's compared to Angling similar schools. So while we have it on one page, or one slide, we're trying not to give you 24 slides here, so for easeability, but just needed some clarity. So this slide in particular is ELA, 5th grade ELA percent proficient. And what we can start to see here is that Lake Center and Woodland are above expectations compared to their individual similar schools. And as a reminder, that is found on figure 20 in your packet, so you can see there are similar schools there. Angling Road, Mooresbridge, and 12th Street are at expectations, while Amberley, Central Elm, and Haverhill are below expectations. And that is compared, again, to their own individual similar schools. Might be good to note that some Portage buildings have other Portage schools in their similar listings, but not all of them do. So a fun one is Amberley has Lake Center in their similar schools, but Lake Center does not have Amberley. So that it fell off there, so you see that. Like Woodland has Angling Road and Haverhill, but Haverhill only has Woodland. So you'll start to see that if you really dig deep into those similar schools listings. But I wanted to make sure you know that. Okay. So we'll do the same thing here for math. We start to look at the math percent proficient, and Angling Road and Lake Center are at expectations compared to their individual similar schools. But then when we go to Amberley, Central Elm, Haverhill, Mooresbridge, 12th Street, and Woodland, they are below those expectations there. And again, you have that list in figure 1 or figure 21 of your packet. So again, compared to their comparators, this is where we're ranking. And as we've talked in the past, why math is so important, that it's risen up to the top of our list of we got to get moving. So when we start to move now into KRESA, and this time, since we can pull all of them into one slide, we're looking at KRESA, which is figure 22 in your packet. We can see where our 8 elementary schools fall amongst the county based on the 2024 spring data for MSTEP. And so within those 28 schools with ELA data available, Mooresbridge, Lake Center, 12th Street, Amberley, and Woodland rank in the top 10 as 1st, 2nd, 4th, 6th, and 7th, respectively. Angling was at 11th and Central L 14th, so they ranked in that top half. And then we had Haverhill ranking at 17th. The number, just as awareness, the number of KRESA schools will vary in this report due to CEPI's data suppression rules, where that protects that individual student. So we could have schools with maybe 1 or 2 students where you could identify them, so their data would not be publicly available at that point. So we start to see here where we're ranking, which I knew that was something we wanted to see how we were doing in comparison within our county. So this is where we are in our ELA. And if we go over into math, and this now is amongst 26 KRESA schools with math data available, so we dropped off 2 there. Lake Center, Mooresbridge, Amberley, and Angling rank in that top 10, 3rd, 4th, 6th, and 7th, respectively. And we have Central L at 11th, Woodland at 12th, Haverhill 13th. So those are ranked in our top half, and then 12th Street at 16th. One little piece of data that I pulled up and I looked at was trying to see, do we have any KRESA schools that are also in our school, PPS schools, individual similar schools? A lot of words there. 12th Street actually has King Westwood, which is the only similar school that is also a KRESA school and not a PPS school. So I thought that was interesting there, that came out of that. So we are, what we're really seeing is we're getting a good pool to see where different people are located, seeing how we're comparing against, whether in county and out of county, and we're starting to see that. So this is just how we did in proficiency, right? So now we're gonna move from proficiency to percent proficient. Now we move from, and that is that percent proficient improvement. So how are we improving with amongst our similar schools? And remember, this is how we're comparing 3 prior years, specifically looking at that percent proficient. That's going to serve as our trend data. And then we have all those similar schools in figure 24 for you. So let's think about that. We have 2024 is the year we're looking at, and we're going to compare it to 3 previous years. So that's going to be our pre-pandemic year, 2019. We're going to take that year. and then we're going to take 2 years post-pandemic. So we're going to have 2022 and 2023 that are going to make up those years. And with that, that's a weighted average based on the number of students who took that test each spring, which is that same approach we've done in past. So we've not changed that process at all. So if we compare our 2024 data to the previous 3-year average for ELA percent proficient, you can see that Amberley, Lake Center, and Woodland, looking at this graph, they are above expectations compared to their individual schools when we're talking about that improvement. When we look at Angling, Central L, and Haverhill, they're at that expectations level, and then Morrisbridge and 12th Street are below expectations. So when you look at this at first glance, you go, this is a lot of data. Now, what does that really mean to me, right? And we're starting to say, well, why would we drop that low and be at expectations? So that's where, when you take your similar schools, if we use, for example, in figure 24, if we were to pull Haverhill, who's at expectations, and that's a negative 4.3% improvement, you're going, whoa, how can that be expectations? But 5 of their similar schools dropped even more compared to Haverhill from that 3-year to this year, and all the way down to a negative 14.9%. So when looking at this, again, you have to look at each one individually by school and then take it and look at that graph, figure 24, to really see that's why. That's what's happening there compared to other similar schools.
Could you repeat Haverhill one more time?
Yes, yeah. So Haverhill is negative 4.3, but 5 of their similar schools were dropping even more. So they were lower than that, when the lowest one was at negative 14.9% of an improvement. So that's what you really have to look at. This graph here really doesn't do it justice. This is just kind of giving you that snapshot here. It is really figure 24 that allows you to say, that's why, that's what's happening. And that's the work that every individual school has to do, right? They have to take a look at their data, and say, what is it that I want to learn? And then which data set helps me to answer that question of what I'm trying to do. So each one of these provides us a very different answer to a very different question. And that's the beauty of the schools being able to dig down into this and say, how do we know? So was it over these 3 years? What happened these 3 prior years compared to this year? And that might answer, oh, well, this was X or this was Y. And so that's where our work coming back to in January as well is we can give you some examples of that, of what schools learned in each of these graphs. And I think that would be really helpful for you. So if we do the same thing, yes.
So what I hear you saying is that figure 24 that's in your monitoring report in your board packet on page 37, this is a summary of where our school's placed. If you want to look at the detail on that, refer back to figure 24.
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Because that would have been a big one to put on a slide deck, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And we're just talking about improvement here.
Yes,
We're
percent.
not talking about whether the school is actually proficient or not, but how many more kids were proficient.
Correct, that improvement piece, right? The first set of slides was, this is our percent, this is the data. Now we're looking at how much did we improve compared to these 3 years, this average.
So even these negative improvement could still be proficient, they just have less.
Yes, so I think this is a good example on the next one, which is the math, right? So if you look at math, Amberley, Lake Center, and Woodland are above expectations compared to their individual similar schools. Central L and Haverhill are at expectations compared to their individual similar schools. But then you see Angling, Morrisbridge, and 12th Street are below expectations. So I think another good one to take a look at is maybe Morrisbridge there. And you would say, hey, I remember back on percent proficient on the very first slides, they were right up here and they're at the top. So now the question is, okay, previous 3 years, we dropped this year, why? What happened? What's going on here for them to answer? It doesn't mean, to your point, that we're not doing well. It's that this piece here, this improvement wasn't here. So we need to look at what that means. It's very tricky on that, to look through it. So you can't just look at this real quick and say, make snap judgments at all. There's a lot of conversations that have to take place, and our schools are doing that. Okay, so now we put it all out here for our K-RESA schools. So we look at this ELA percent proficient improvement compared to K-RESA schools in figure 26. That's this again. And here now we have 27 K-RESA schools with ELA data available. And there we see that Woodland, Amberley, and Lake Center rank in the top 10 at 3rd, 6th, and 9th respectively in percent improvement. And then Angley at 11th, Central L at 12th. So they rank in that top half, followed by 12th Street at 17th, Haverhill at 18th, and Mooresbridge at 21st. So again, you have to start taking a look at what's happening here. Where were they percent proficient, and how did they compare to the rest of the K-RESA schools? You could really nerd out on this for quite a while if you really wanted to. And so we do exactly the same thing here in math, and we start to see that. And this time we have 25 schools with that math data available in our K-RESA area. And we see that Woodland, Amberley, and Haverhill rank in the top 10 at 5th, 6th, and 8th respectively. Angling at 11th, so they're in that top half. And now we go to Lake Center, 13th, Central L at 15th, 12th Street, 23rd, and Mooresbridge, 25th. Okay, so lots to think about here and lots to analyze for our schools. I'm gonna give you some more data. So again, that was about percent improvement. So that's like, what are we doing as a school? How does that work as a school? It's really school focused. But once we start talking now about student growth, that is going to be more about how individual students performed in 5th grade compared to their peers with similar prior test scores. So when they were in 3rd and 4th grade, these current those 5th graders, they got scores and they performed at a certain level. So what happens is we grab these other kids that perform similarly to them in 3rd and 4th grade, and then we compare them to their 5th grade scores. So we want to see, did Barb and Kelly grow similarly when they went to 5th grade? Because we scored similarly when we were in 3rd and 4th grade. So are we doing it? Am I outscoring Barb? Is Barb outscoring me? How much growth are we doing? So now it's about the individual kids at this point, whereas before I didn't talk about individual kids. We were talking about how are we doing percent improvement. So when we do that, know that a school, and you're seeing this weird thing where people are up and down and all over the place. So a school can show low improvement in proficiency, but still show high growth. And that, since improvement in proficiency is a school measure, which is what I was just saying, and growth is that individual student measure. So then it's important, we said this earlier, average growth as SGPs at 30 to 69, and above average growth is 70 to 99. You would never look at all this data at once, right, as a school. You would just never do it. You would pull it apart bit by bit. Maybe some people would. But so just know that we're really looking at academic growth. We look at this a lot, right? We want to know, are our kids really growing? How is this kid growing? And if they're not really growing, why not? And what can we do and structures can we put in place to support them? So statistically, norm for the percent of students with average growth or above average growth is around 70%. And that's important because what we're going to say now in this next graph is any Portage school with at least 70% of their students in these ranges are considered to be at expectation. So we want to know, are we growing these kids here? Are they growing at a good rate? And any of them with less than 70% is considered below expectations. So we're going to look at figure 27. So on this one shows the 2024% of students with average or above average growth for each school. And we also included in there, because we didn't think we had enough data, the 2023 data for you for comparison purposes. So you can kind of see where we were. And the 2022 is not available because of the pandemic. That word keeps coming out. So for ELA, what we see is Angling Road, Central L, Lake Center, Mooresbridge, 12th Street, and Woodland are at expectations, hitting that 70%. With 4 of our schools, Angling, Central L, Mooresbridge, and 12th Street, having over 80% of students with average or above average growth. We want to see that. Like, that's really good to see that. Amberley at 69 and Haverhill at 68 are below expectations, but they are within that 2% of meeting that goal of 70%. So they're just eking by. They're getting real close to that 70%. So we're really proud to see that our kids are moving here. When we look at math, what we have here, same thing, Central L, Haverhill, Lake Center, and Mooresbridge, they are at expectation with 3 schools, Central L, Haverhill, and Mooresbridge, having over 80% of students with average or above average growth. And then Amberley and Angling, 69 and 68% are below expectations, but they are within that 2% again of meeting at 70. And then we have 12th Street at 62% and Woodland at 45% that are below that expectation. So with all of that, we start to say, okay, what is it that our kids need from us and what are we gonna do next here? And that's this, right? Like, and we're not gonna get really into the nitty gritty today, but what I wanna share with you, what does all this mean? It is a lot, I just said that, it's a ton to unpack. We have to, examine it from different angles. What is your purpose? Are we looking at individual kids? Are we looking at curriculum? What is it that we wanna know and what are we going after? So I wanna focus on these today, but really if we start at professional development and alignment, we've talked a lot about this over the past couple years, that our work is grounded in our continuous improvement. So we're starting with that K-12 professional development and long-range planning. That's been a big focus for us. We're starting to have our educators really see how it's not a one-and-done kind of PD, but it's ongoing, it's connected, and that they are things that they can use in their classrooms. It allows them to go a lot deeper into their practice instead of just really absorbing a bunch of broad information that's really disconnected from what they want. So we've been really intentional about our PD. We move over to the second circle of curriculum review cycles. CRC, you'll probably hear us say that quite a bit, the CRC process. It's important to highlight our transition to go into phase 2 for mathematics. So we've been in phase 1 from last year to this one, where we bumped that up and said, okay, what do we need to do? We have been working with those teams. Tracy and Mackenzie have been huge on getting them together, walking through the research, asking, all the important questions of the work, aligning of the standards, and instructional expectations are coming up. Like, that's where we're at now. Like, what is it that we need to align in our standards? K-12, what do we expect our teachers to do in mathematics, and making sure that every single kid gets that advantage, that teacher is using those instructional strategies. So even though we are in that early stages of math CRC, we know that certain, especially at elementary, instructional priorities just couldn't wait. And so we have been initiating that PD for our teachers, focus on instructional strategies, specifically fact fluency, which really what that is that it is a fundamental component of number sense, building their number sense, understanding how numbers work. And so the review and selection of instructional resources for math do not occur until phase 3. So if anybody's like, they're picking this book, we are not. We are really in what are the standards? We have to do that deep knowledge work first, because we're not even close to that yet. That comes into phase 3. By having a phased approach, we're establishing a strong foundation in standards, pedagogy, before exploring materials that best supports our goals. So ELA, if we move into ELA within the CRC process, they're in phase 3 of implementation, so they're implementing right now. And that's full integration of the curriculum by all teachers. And to do a successful implementation at elementary, we know that they're supported by their reading specialist, through coaching, with helping them refine their instructional practices, because when it's new, you have to work on it. It's hard to try something new and you're gonna stumble over it and you're gonna get better, and a coach helps you do that. PLCs, we use those for ongoing professional learning and collaboration and problem solving together, so them coming together with their coaches in there. It's a huge, important piece of it. They're prepping together, they're asking questions, they're grappling with information. And then we have our grade level team collaboration, where they come together as a district and they align strategies. They share those best practices. What's working, what's not working? How can I do this differently? What did you do? That's really important for them. So this comprehensive support framework really helps to ensure that consistency, effectiveness in delivering the curriculum across all our classrooms. And when you're in initial implementation, it's really important to be supported and help them move through that. Moving to the next one is our MSTEP prep plan. So we are really working on having a comprehensive plan at each of our buildings. The teachers are engaging in data-driven planning. So this data here, they're gonna pull pieces of that out and examine it. They're gonna look at, there's even more data, shocking, that MSTEP can provide you around critical areas that you can start to look at. And we were able to identify already in our curriculum, hey, what is happening in 5th grade here? Are we teaching multiplying and dividing of fractions? And as we unearthed it, we were not yet. And so there's some moves that we can make in our curriculum. And that's just part of the learning process, right? And that's what you do. So they're working on that, implementing curriculum with fidelity. Again, teachers supported through coaching and feedback. And then the principals are working towards that optimal testing conditions and ensuring, right, that our families are part of the process of collaboration, readiness, putting their kids to bed on time, having a good breakfast, all the good things before they have to come into a situation which, you know, testing is hard, and we know that it's hard, and it's hard when they're little, but we want to give them the best advantage we can to be successful. If we move around to the coaching framework, that's really a critical element still in supporting teachers, as I mentioned earlier, enhancing our instructional practices. We have our reading specialists, our engagement specialists at the elementary level, district coaches. They're all dedicated to increasing student engagement by collaborating with our teachers to help improve practice and student outcomes. This year, our focus on coaching has really been around 2 specific areas, opportunities and support for participation in meaning making, as well as student talk. So those 2 key areas for students to be active participants. So it's great when you hear about the furniture and the opportunities and how we can utilize space to allow students to have meaningful conversations. It's been pretty cool to watch how furniture impacts that. So, and you can do it without furniture, but it definitely helps when they're mobile. Finally, we do recognize that professional learning communities, as I mentioned earlier, is a driving force in this work. I think it's important to note that teachers team with their elementary principal, with that reading specialist, or the engagement specialist. They engage in those deep conversations, the analysis, again, of that data, looking at the 4 instructional components. What do we do if they know it? What do we do if they don't have it yet? And the fidelity of curriculum implementation. How do we support? How can we help you? And then through focused discussions, they serve as that platform for identifying areas where we're strong, right? In certain buildings, wow, we've got this, or other areas where, but this is where we're gonna work compared to other buildings, right? They're gonna pick and choose those areas based on the data where they need to focus on their strengths. So, and then, as we know, if we get back to the middle there, this is all continuous improvement. And if we're not going around the circle and looking at the data as we go through it, we're not going to really get anywhere. So it's really important that the teams, that we have the time together, that teams work together. I think I said it multiple times between the reading specialist, the engagement specialist, the principal. that leadership team working alongside the teachers who have that time together in a PLC, it matters so much to allow them to have that time with their colleagues. So we are just hopeful, and we've been working really hard to ensure some good systems. That's been our MyKIP goal, and these are the systems that we're using and strengthening. And that with that work and with the data that we continuously improve. And know that I look forward to come back in January to go further in depth, but maybe not on the data per se, but maybe a little bit more some examples of the analysis of what we've done with this data from there. So, and we'll have a K-12 lens, so it'll be Dr. Pasco and I kind of going off of there. What questions might you have, or how can I help you tonight?
I appreciate so much the difference in data. I appreciate that this is data that is used by the schools. It's not just put together for the board, but it's useful data. And I'm looking forward to January when we hear more to kind of sum it up. Now we've seen the data, but it's nice to have more conclusions, more what we're doing as we move forward. So thank you, and looking forward.
Well, yeah, I'll go ahead. Kelly, thank you. This was enlightening, and this is, so I go back to the retreat we had last spring, where we got our first taste at looking at this, and I think we were all pretty excited until, last month, and then this month we're seeing some of the data live. And just to connect the dots, so this data comes back to Ns 1.1, which, and they're ordered that way. There's only 5 Ns, and this is the first one. So this is really, the board has said this is kind of the most important stuff. So it's good to have this and have it presented this way. I would ask you and Michael too, I think I said this last month, when you come back in January, it would help me if you could, among other things that you're gonna do, is shave it down to a point, and give us your main takeaways, and kind of where you're gonna go from here. And just, I'm just interested in your honest, unvarnished reflection on this. Because, you can, and we've set ourselves up for this. We said we want to see the data this way. And you put it out there, and some stuff looks really good, and some stuff is humbling. And I had to really work to find that word. Because some of this stuff, it's in red, right? And it's not where we want it. We need to move it. But at the same time, I wanted to make a statement, but it's also a question, is no defensiveness. We can't point fingers. This is teamwork, focus, and moving forward, and we shouldn't be defensive about what's happened. It's all moving forward. But at the same time, not denying, right? Because some of this stuff, it's like, right, it needs kind of a fresh approach. I'm curious, here's my kind of unfair question. But just in general, how are people inside kind of reacting to this? Can people own it? This might be new for them to see these comparators. And we did that to try to be fair, but it doesn't always show that we're comparing well, right, to these other schools. So
Yeah.
I'm curious about that, and you do not need to give a deep answer. I'm just...
I think Mark and I talked a little bit this morning. I think it depends on I was joking with your strengths, right? Your strengths finder. If you have competitor in in your top 10, man, you're like, whoa, I'm going at it. And one of our principals at the secondary level, he was like, all right, I'm calling up that district. I know who the and he's like, this is what I'm gonna do. Others of us, right, that maybe that's not one of your top strengths and you're more of a learner, or you're gonna take time to dig into it a little bit deeper and understand it more, and that's how you're gonna work through it. So I think they all have varying levels of what's next, but I think what we've done is said, these are similar. And now we go, okay, and you have to sit in that a little bit. And I think that's where we're at, is just kind of sitting in it for a little bit and not sure. I know when I say not sure, I know they're doing the things, right, for our kids every day, and they're making changes in the M-STEP prep, and they're analyzing it, and they're doing that. But not sure in this terms of what does it all mean? Like, the same thing they did when they sat down with us, they were like, oh, that's a lot of data. So you have to pull each type apart for different purposes, and that's where we're at. So we're also in the beginning stages, I think, as a whole team of pulling apart the data and knowing what to do with each individual type. But yeah, the competitors in us,
Yeah.
we're gonna go after it.
Well, and it can be overwhelming. There's so much here, and I know you have so much more, and that's why I asked it, I mean, especially for me or for the board, to try to bring it to a point for us. And I know it'll take you all some time. I think, I'm good.
You're good? All right. Well, thank you all. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly.
Okay, we'll move to our comments and communications section. Is there anyone who wishes to address the board this evening? Thank you. Thank you. We have 3 speakers this evening. I believe you've all been here before, so you know the 3-minute rule, so we won't go through all that. And we'll welcome our first speaker, Lindsay Zerber.
My name is Lindsay Zerber, and I'm here to ask you to recognize the overtly biased nature of the initial review of the breadwinner and call for an objective evaluation to take place. This committee was made up of 9 members, including only 1 5th-grade teacher out of 29 in the district, who also happened to be an early adopter. The rest of the committee included only 1 other teacher who again was an early adopter, admin that have a clear bias in this matter, and only 1 true community member. There was not a single member that was solely a parent or educator outside the district, and only 1 member that even has an elementary student. As I researched educational institutions' handling of these types of conflicts, I consistently found policies in which committees were formed with even representation on both sides of the argument, and open communication was encouraged. Not a single policy involves separating complainants or putting them in situations of obvious intimidation, where a single individual is forced to voice their concerns before a group of people that disproportionately represented only one side of the argument. Overall, this committee has the appearance of being handpicked to ensure that the only result would be the approval of this novel. This is a gross abuse of power and clearly was not handled properly. The entire review was guided by the curriculum director, who brought the curriculum to the board for approval in the first place. She extended the invitation to the committee members, thereby giving her the power to choose the makeup of it and thus ensure its outcome. She also took the minutes of the review, allowing what was included in this report to be at her discretion. After reading the notes, it's abundantly clear that the information included intentionally skewed the argument to one side. I question why the curriculum director was directing this committee, as she has an obvious bias in this matter. The entire process was clearly decided before it even began. Also, the committee was informed that the purpose of the review was to ensure that the curriculum was grounded in their 4 pillars, one of which states that it is fit for all students. Based on the number of parents upset at various schools, it is clear this is not the case. The group was additionally instructed that the purpose was to evaluate the book considering its educational merit. The complaint had nothing to do with the educational value of the book, but rather the violent nature of its content and whether or not it is developmentally appropriate for this age level. Our stance has always been that this book has value when used at the correct grade level. According to the dozens of teachers, counselors, and parents I have spoken to, that grade level should be 7th or 8th grade. As you review this matter, please consider this. The inclusion of this book at a 5th grade level has brought harm to students, causing nightmares, fear, and anxiety. It has harmed the relationship between the district and parents, creating anger and distrust. The exclusion of this harms no one. Parents who wish for their child to read it can still provide those opportunities. Parents who didn't want their children to read this did not have those same rights. They were not given essential information about the content or an option to opt out. Why, when there are so many quality books that can teach about the same regions and ideals, can we not find a solution that works for all? Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. Our next speaker is Bethany Metzger. Welcome.
My name is Bethany Metzger, and I'm here to talk about the committee's failure to properly evaluate the violence in the book The Breadwinner. One committee member stated that there is violence, but in the context of the lessons, it's not about the violence. In our research, we have found this to be blatantly untrue. As Lesson 12 specifically asks the question, why is Parvana losing hope? To answer that question, students would have to reference the events directly preceding this. Those events are the graphic murder and dismemberment of the character Homa's family. Is this nonviolent? Another committee member said, the bone scene with Mr. Skull, while the topic is rather macabre, bones are not indicative of being graphic. The addition of having a mascot may seem a bit disturbing, but comes across as a moment of humor or lightness on a dark subject. I personally find nothing humorous in the children digging up bones of people as a way of making money. To even describe this scene in such a way makes me question the people in charge of presenting this to the children. In the conclusion of this scene, Parvana is so disgusted with herself for doing this work that she repeatedly washes herself in an attempt to wash away her feelings of being dirty from this traumatic experience. This certainly doesn't sound humorous to me. Another committee member stated, the discussion of landmines is also effective in discussing real-world situations. Parvana smiles when Shazia jokes about not walking on one, which gives the reader a nonverbal indication of ease of verse versus fear-inducing. To describe this scene as being one of joking or ease has me questioning if the committee even read it. This scene goes on to describe Parvana's overwhelming anxiety over simply trying to use the bathroom. She goes on to explain how her brother was killed by a landmine. She is trying to decide if she should risk being killed by a landmine to use the bathroom in private. I fail to see how this is lighthearted and not fear-inducing. Finally, one participant references the arena scene and says, there is a clear slide projected with a disclaimer that the topic is violent. While reading the scene, I didn't actually find it as bad as what it seemed. While it is traumatic to hear, there are worse things shown on TV and movies. First, do we honestly expect children to read that slide in class and inform the teacher in front of all of their classmates that they are concerned about it? This in particular is a tough age for children where the way their peers see them matters and can lead to ridicule. Also, this particular committee member said that she did not find it as bad as she thought. However, she is not a 10-year-old child that has not been repeatedly exposed to this. To say that there are worse things on TV is a poor argument for several reasons. First, it assumes that most parents allow their children to watch such things. As a teacher that knows many parents, I can say that this is not true for most people. Like us, they still value their children's innocence. Secondly, the parent is ultimately responsible for what their child watches, as it is their right. They alone get to determine what is appropriate. Once again, we return to the school system thinking that they have the right to decide what level of violence is acceptable for the children. We are asking the board to ensure a proper, non-biased evaluation is done, that this book receives the review that it should have had in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you, Bethany. Our last speaker is Stephen Zerber. Welcome, sir.
Hi, my name is Steve Zerber, and I'm here to talk about several issues I have with the review of the breadwinner. In the review, it stated that the students are not reading these texts without the support and guidance of the teachers. It was also explained to us by the administration that in a September meeting, that the teachers have been properly trained to handle these tough topics. We, however, discovered that the first training actually held by teachers took place November 1st, more than a month and a half from our meeting, which we were told it had happened. Furthermore, the statement also establishes the school as having the right to direct students' understanding and not the parents. Parents' rights are to be able to support their children's emotional well-being when dealing with extremely confronting topics should always take precedence over the school system. This right was made impossible by the school's lack of disclosure of the violent content of this book. The review stated that the committee explored possibility of substituting The Breadwinner with another book, but decided it was irreplaceable. They offered no evidence of what other texts were being explored and never referenced a single title. As there were only 4 working days between the initial meeting and the second meeting, I sincerely doubt due diligence was done in this regard, as the committee members are mostly working members within the Portage Public School District. And this entire process took place during a single work week. Are we to believe that they had time to read the book, explore all the lessons of the book, including enhanced lesson plans, and research other books that could teach the same subject in 4 days while working full-time? Another committee member stated, students will learn through debates that there are different opinions, and that is okay, and to talk about it. It is ironic to me that we are trying to teach our children that, yet the administration does not want to hear the different opinions of the book. There has been no parent meetings, only bureaucracy and isolation of those who offer opinions different than theirs. Other than a few times we've spoken to school board meetings, and all their discussions have been held independently, even though we know there are many parents that are concerned. If this text is so above reproach, why are we afraid to allow an open, honest discussion to take place? I'm asking the board to take a further look at the proper review that took place, one that is free from bias and overseen by a neutral party. Prove to the parents that it can be handled in an ethical and professional way. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Are there any comments this evening by board trustees?
I just wanted to say that this is my last board meeting, that I have been honored to serve on the board, and so I appreciate all of the trustees that I've served with. I've learned so much about this district, and I just realized that, you know, it is all for the students, and that everybody has been really dedicated and very passionate about that goal. So I will miss everyone, but I have been happy to be on this journey.
Thanks, Ian. We'll miss you.
Your insights have been so valuable. And I have appreciated that you are willing to ask questions in a way that makes you think, makes us think, instead of just having an opinion. It makes us analyze our own opinion. And you do it in a very friendly way that is just amazing, and you will be missed.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I reserve my comment time to the special agenda?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We'll honor your last wish.
I get a cigarette, too.
It's ugly.
I guess you didn't get to pick your last meal.
Good one.
Any other trustee comments?
Well, I mentioned it during our earlier meeting, but owner linkage meeting this Wednesday, and talking about some topics to cover as key communications to the community in the next 6 months.
Thank you, Bo. Anyone else?
I have enjoyed some of the holiday concerts that have occurred and look forward to the ones that are still yet to occur. If you have the opportunity, either those in the room or those who are listening online, to attend them, they are incredible.
For sure. Anything else? Yeah. Okay, very good. We'll move to our consent agenda on page 46. We have 2 items tonight. Approval of the November 18th, 2024 special meeting and regular business meeting, and to approve the purchase of 3 77-passenger buses, 1 lift bus, and 1 77-passenger bus with air conditioning, all from Holland Bus, for a total of $727,924, the funds for which will come from the 2019 Bond Fund Proposal 1 unallocated contingency. Are there any exceptions to the consent agenda as presented? Now, hearing none, the consent agenda is approved, and we'll move to our first action item, which is to approve the PAC committee member. And there's a motion, please, on page 83.
President Van Antwerp, I move that the Board of Education approve as presented. Oh, wait, that's the wrong thing. The nomination of Kendall Newhouse to the Special Education Parent Advisory Committee at KRESA for a 3-year term which expires in 2027.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Yes.
And we have Ann Gordon here, who is stepping in for Janine, Dr. Gearhart, who is absent this evening. So, Ann, I'll let you make any comments.
Thank you, Superintendent Beeling and trustees. I'm just here to ask for the nomination for Kendall Newhouse to the PAC, and wondering if you have any questions about that.
How about just a hearty thank you?
Yes, we do appreciate her. This will be her second term.
Special education is so important to make sure that everybody's support needs are met.
So this is a continuation of her existing, or adding on to the term that she already holds. It's not a new position, new person to that.
Another 3 years.
Well, we appreciate her service, and we're thankful that she's willing to re-up to do this important work. Thank you. All those in favor of approving Kendall Newhouse as to the Special Education Parent Advisory Committee at K-RESA, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes. Our next action item is classroom technology for the new Central and Haverhill Elementaries. And there's a motion, please, on page 85.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Board of Education approve as presented the purchase of Lightspeed Tech microphones with media links and LG 75-inch flat panel televisions in the amount of $207,102, the funds for which will be drawn from the 2021 fund.
Thank you, Bo. Is there a second? Thank you. Ryan? Welcome.
Good evening, trustees, Superintendent Beetle. So this recommendation was about the Lightspeed microphones and the flat panel TVs. And so this is, as I mentioned before, the first of a few classroom technology recommendations that'll be coming your way in upcoming meetings. So any questions about this tonight?
Probably not, because you explained it so well the last time you...
Right, a little precursor to it. All right, well, more coming in the future. Thanks.
All right, let's make this happen. All those in favor of the classroom technology for the new elementary schools, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes and technology is on the way. I wanted to add the next item, which is a proclamation in recognition and appreciation of distinguished service for our retiring board members. And there is a motion at your places. If we could have a volunteer to read the one for Keith, please.
Well, I would be honored.
Super.
This is a resolution in recognition and appreciation of distinguished service by Keith Kroll. Whereas Keith Kroll was most recently appointed to the Portage Public Schools Board of Education on February 13, 2023, to fill the vacancy created by the resignation of trustee Kurt Droppers, and served on the board through December 2024. Prior to that, on January 4, 2021, Keith was appointed to the board to fill a vacancy created by the passing of trustee Joanne Wilson and served through December 2022. Keith has served on the board for nearly 4 years. Whereas during his board service, Keith served on the board's Owner Linkage Committee, Policy Committee, and Audit Committee, and he continues to serve as a member of the Portage Educational Foundation. Whereas as a board member, Keith has served graciously, tirelessly, with the utmost care and compassion, even through the most trying of times, including the COVID-19 pandemic. He also served during times of celebration for our district and community, including the passage of the $175,725,000 elementary schools and district-wide improvement bond proposal in August 2021, as well as the building and site sinking fund renewal in August 2024. Keith has provided invaluable insight, perspective, and guidance to the Board of Education. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Portage Public Schools Board of Education acknowledges and extends its gratitude to Keith Kroll for his dedication and service to the district, staff, students, community, and to the Board of Education. Be it further resolved that this resolution is saved in the permanent minutes of the Portage Public Schools Board of Education, and a copy is given to Keith Kroll. Adopted on this 9th day of December 2024, Portage Public Schools Board of Education, and signed by all of us and Mr. Beeline.
Thank you, Bo. Is there a motion, please, to approve the resolution?
I move that we approve the resolution.
Thank you, Emily. Is there a second?
Second?
Thank you, Kimberly. All those in favor of approving the resolution in recognition and appreciation of distinguished service for Keith Kroll, please say aye.
Aye.
Very good, Keith. It was unanimous. All right. Do you have any comments?
Well, I do. Well, thank you both. You know, and I hear what he has to say, and it's like, gosh, this has been a really successful time, and I think in an awful lot of ways it has been, not because of anything I've done, but because of everybody in this room. And, I mean, starting with staff, it just guarantees success, really, the way things came together, and, you know, just to have a finance person that can even make me appreciate numbers, which is hard to do, and it happened. And to use Kelly's words, to have a curriculum, people who geek out over this stuff, you know, that's just wonderful. And, you know, Johnny, you have become such a fixture in these things, these meetings for me, that I think come Monday nights, as I'm setting my calendar, it's like must-see TV, 6:30, tune in, Johnny. And it's always fun to hear reports, and especially tonight. Some of you I knew before, you know, back early in my journey through the schools, before I ever got on the school board. Jeremy was one of those people. I wish he was still here, but he meant a lot to me. On the board, Barb, you made it impossible not to mess anything up, you know? You did remember to, oh, yes, of course, and right away. But then to all the veterans who came before me, thank you so much. My board buddy, Bo, who taught me how to make a motion in the proper way so that I at least didn't have to sweat that too much my first meeting here. And then finally to Mark and Randy, my leaders, my mentors. Again, it would be impossible not to succeed under the leadership of both of you. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Keith, for your service to the district. We appreciate it, sir. And we'll have a certificate, a presentation to you at the end of the meeting with a photo.
Wonderful.
All right.
Thank you.
All right.
I mean, and can we say nice things now?
Yeah.
I withheld.
Right,
I was
you
gonna-
did.
But just, so, I mean, Keith, consummate professional, gentleman, calm, big picture person, really good to serve with. Keith and I probably met 25 years ago in Marshall, Michigan. We're both working in healthcare, and our paths crossed there, and you moved to Portage, and good to rekindle that relationship. And I think before you even were on this board, you were serving on the Portage Education Foundation.
Yes.
And that's where we kind of got reacquainted there, and I was so thrilled to find out that you will still remain on that board.
So I look forward to continuing on that board where I oversee, and this is, talk about the joys of evaluating all the scholarship applications that come in. And that's been an enjoyable thing. And as far as community service goes, I'm just looking forward to other opportunities that come up. My work is done now with the schools, but who knows what else may be out there, aside from the foundation. So, yeah, thanks.
It's a pleasure to continue working with you in different areas.
And you have lots of expertise to offer.
Thank you, Terry.
Oh my, we also have a resolution for Ian. Could somebody please read the resolution in recognition and appreciation of distinguished service by Ian Hamilton?
I will be happy to read it. Resolution in recognition and appreciation of distinguished service by Ian Hamilton. Whereas Ian Hamilton was appointed to the Portage Public Schools Board of Education on December 12, 2022, to fill the vacancy created by the resignation of trustee Rusty Rathburn, and served on the board through December 2024. Whereas, as a board member, Ian has served graciously, tirelessly, with the utmost care and compassion. She served during times of celebration for our district, including the Building and Site Sinking Fund renewal in August 2024. Ian has provided invaluable insight, perspective, and guidance to the Board of Education. Now therefore be it resolved that the Portage Public Schools Board of Education acknowledges and extends its gratitude to Ian Hamilton for her dedication and service to the district, staff, students, community, and to the Board of Education. Be it further resolved that this resolution is saved in the permanent minutes of the Portage Public Schools Board of Education, and a copy is given to Ian Hamilton, adopted this 9th day of December, 2024, Portage Public Schools Board of Education.
Thank you, Terry. Is there a motion, please, to approve the resolution?
I move to approve the resolution.
Excellent, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Terry. All those in favor of approving the resolution in recognition and appreciation of distinguished service by trustee Ian Hamilton, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The motion passes. Again, unanimous.
Can't believe it.
And Ian, I can't think of a finer individual to walk out the door with.
Thank you. Yeah, I already gave my comments, but I know that it has been a short run, but I appreciate everyone. I'll still be watching and listening. My kids, as you all know, go to Portage Public Schools, so I will be around listening and appreciate everyone.
When I just appreciate how we came to get you.
Yes, you did.
You would have known that your picture in an article about your family in a magazine would have led us to you, but knowing that you were my neighbor, and we've had some great conversations prior to your moving somewhere else, and it's just been really fun to get to know you and your family, and just appreciate your professionalism and expertise and viewpoint too. That's different than some of the rest of us, so we appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I don't have a 25-year history with you. I have exactly a 2-year history with you, and it started when we met in this room, probably 2 years ago. And it's been a blast. And I would have to say, to describe your style would be, and you get away with this, incredibly polite and at the same time incredibly blunt. And you pull it off. You ask the question. You ask the tough question. And yes, I tell people stories about this lady who gets away with doing it. And so that's a great skill.
Thank
and
you.
I've had fun watching it, and I've had fun watching the answers that your questions elicit.
Thank you. I will miss you.
Well, Ian, we thank you for your service. We thank you for your insight. It was said earlier that you ask really good questions, and you really do. You make us think, and I particularly appreciate your comments on how we track and display student data. We had never thought of that, and we appreciate your input there. So thank you very much, and keep watching, okay?
I will.
All right, and we got a certificate for you too.
Yay.
So we'll present that at the end of the meeting. Thank you very much.
Real quickly, I want to say to both Ian and Keith, I sincerely appreciate the insight you have brought to the various discussions we've had, particularly the 4 o'clock meetings, because we get to go back and forth a little bit more there, and how differently you think and approach different situations, and I really appreciate you bringing that insight to the board. I think it's been extraordinarily beneficial, and you will be sorely missed.
Very much so. Keep challenging us.
I will.
Good. Good.
Okay, we'll move to our final action item of the evening, and that's the appeal regarding curriculum materials. And I'll just make some opening remarks to set this up. This appeal is from Katrina Schrader, following a decision by a reconsideration committee to maintain a children's novel, The Breadwinner, as instructional material for 1 unit of the 5th grade reading and writing curriculum. Board members have received copies of all the following for review. We have the minutes of the first reconsideration committee meeting where Mrs. Schrader voiced her concerns about the impact of graphic violence on students in the novel The Breadwinner. We have the minutes of the second reconsideration committee meeting where the committee voted unanimously 9-0 to maintain The Breadwinner as part of the curriculum. An email from Dr. Pasco to Mrs. Schrader upholding the decision of the reconsideration committee. A letter from Mrs. Schrader to the reconsideration committee clarifying her arguments about the novel and responding to comments made during the reconsideration meetings. We have a letter from Mrs. Schrader to the Board of Education appealing the decision of the Reconsideration Committee on the grounds that the Reconsideration Committee members were biased, that operational policies and administrative guidelines were not provided before meetings of the reconsideration took place. And during meetings of the Reconsideration Committee, Mrs. Schrader was made to look like she was the only person who had issues with the graphic violence in the breadwinner. We have minutes of a policy committee meeting where members of the policy committee requested background information and clarification of the relevant policies from the superintendent, since this appeal is something the board has never been asked to do before. We received an email from the superintendent to the board providing background information and clarifying the operational policies and administrative guidelines that apply. We have public comment received at several meetings, and most of those public comments were given to our board secretary, who made copies for us after the meetings. So everybody has all this, correct? Right, okay. So there are two motions on page 91. We need a motion on the floor to begin board discussion of this appeal. Is there a motion, please?
Can I ask a question before we make a motion?
Sure.
I don't know if that's appropriate or not. During the comments this evening, the main thread I heard was, let's not decide to keep it or not, but can we redo with a different grouping of people? And I don't know if that's something that is appropriate or not to consider. So just wanted to toss that out there.
Well, I think we have to address the
Okay.
appeal.
Okay.
Well, President Van Antwerp, I would like to make a motion that the Board of Education move to deny the appeal and maintain the breadwinner in the curriculum.
Thank you, Keith. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ian. Okay, I'll open this up for board discussion. So anyone can start.
Well, I'll lead off by saying that I feel like my role as a board member is to review the process. We have people in place to implement the process. I think it was thoroughly implemented, and that is the basis for my motion as I've made it.
I would agree with Keith, and one of the big pieces of information that we received was that 19 people were asked to be on the review committee. And so to me, that would show that every effort was made to get a diverse group of people, that it's not exactly easy to find people to serve. So.
Thank you, Terry.
I frequently find myself wearing two hats. Mom, board member. And it's a tough role to balance. Because as a mom, I've read the book. Is that a book I want my kid to read? Well, there's some questionable things. I think it's a remarkably easy read for a fifth grader, but the content in it is questionable. The visual images that are described are disturbing. And I'm kind of stuck in an interesting spot, because while I want to support and follow the process, I do hear from the perspective that we don't feel like they were heard by the appropriate group of people. I know if I was a parent in that situation, I would be probably following those same steps. That being said, I don't have the information for myself as far as what else could we have in place for the kids to be reading that would get that information that they wanted, that the reason this book is being included. What other source of material can give that same content that may not be as graphic? Because giving fifth graders, and granted, yes, there are fifth graders that watch horror movies. There are first graders that parents let them watch horror movies. That's fine. That's their choice as a parent. There are other parents who are much more reserved and much more concerned about maintaining that innocence of childhood. And yes, in fifth grade, we're starting to learn and learn more, explore more. We're getting more into those adult topics. But I find it challenging to be talking with my kid about the horrors of war Yes, war happens. Yes, bad happens. Yes, it's in the world. But this is horrific. To be talking with your kid about a pile of heads in a basket like melons. That's one of the things that's depicted in this book. I don't know how many of us have read it, but that's one of the things that I don't think had been mentioned, but that's one of that I read that really resonated with me was a basket of melons that are heads. So while I know our job is to say, did we follow the process properly? I can see some missteps in there, and I could see that being grounds for us to explore an alternate review of the book. Perhaps to get more parents to volunteer that aren't necessarily aligned, part of the school district, but are parents in the school district but aren't necessarily working at the school district. I don't think it would be that challenging to find parents to do that. I myself would do that if I was a parent in that situation. And in fact, I have with books at my kids' school. So for me, I think that we should grant the appeal and move through that process.
So I would say personally that I would lean to be a conservative parent, protective of my kids. That being said, I had a child in second grade when 9/11 happened. And that was a horrific thing. And it was something real that happened that we had to explain to our kids. And the war in Afghanistan is a result of that. So the real stuff happens, and we do have to embrace it and make sure that our kids know that things go on in other parts of the world that don't go on here. And actually, as an aside, isn't it great that we live here and those things don't happen here? So, yeah, I understand what you're saying, but I also feel like we can't protect our kids from all of that's going on out there. And honestly, if there were things in the book that were sexually explicit or blatant use of drugs, alcohol, things that kids could be potentially drawn to emulate, I would be much more upset about that being discussed in 5th grade than something that's going on the other side of the world. So that's just my perspective.
I respect that perspective.
Thank you, Terry.
Do you want to go next, Bo, or I see you have comments written, or should I?
I'm open. Yeah, please go.
I don't have specific comments written, I just have some talking points, so hopefully they make sense. As I looked at this, I looked at a number of things. First of all, I read the book because I don't want to just take what someone says about it and make an assumption, because I'm one who wants to see is what I'm being told accurate. It's just who I am. I want to avoid the danger of a single story, because if you get only one side of something or you make a snap judgment about something, chances are you might not be accurate. And so I wanted to come to my own conclusion. I thought about when I first sought to be a board member, and I promised to myself and to those I spoke to that I would listen and consider. That didn't necessarily mean that I would agree, but I would listen and I would consider. And I wanted to apply that to this process. In looking at this book, first of all, it's a new book to Portage, relatively new. When you consider textbooks or instructional materials that we have had in our schools, this is one of the newer ones. It's rather new and for adoption, and anytime you adopt something new, there will be wrinkles that you don't expect. And when you look at something and say, this is going to be amazing, it doesn't always work out as well as you do, and that's why we review things, and that's why we look at them again, and that's why we consider as they're in process to see how it shakes out. And we realize that nothing that we implement will be perfect, as much as we would love for it to be, and as much as we intend for it to be, nothing will be perfect. So So I kind of went with those. The board's role in this is what I looked at also. The question, is it procedurally correct? You know, how are we as a board supposed to look at this? And the board provides accountability. If we don't provide accountability, then what is the purpose of having a board? And so with that in mind, I wanted to take this very seriously, as I know every one of us in looking at this has done so. As I have heard comments and listened to comments from others, we're taking this seriously. And I want parents to know that you have been heard and considered. And I want also the acknowledgement to the curriculum team that did a lot of hard work figuring out curriculum in a very short time. And there's a lot to be considered. So that's kind of the base of what I was looking at with short turnaround and so on. And in looking at policies, it stood out to me here. Of course, I highlighted in the wrong color. The Board of Education shall provide instructional materials and equipment within budgetary constraints, which means that ultimately responsibility is on us. And that's a pretty serious consideration to look at. There's also policy regarding, well, it's an administrative guideline regarding criteria for selection of materials, and point J on that refers to the maturity and or comprehension level of the students. And comprehension, no big deal, but maturity, especially developmentally for students, is this appropriate for them, and is this the most appropriate? And as I was looking at this, a comment came to mind. It's actually given to me, and it resonated, so I wrote it down. Just because 9 and 10-year-olds are going through this doesn't mean that 9 and 10-year-olds should be reading the details about it. And how we discuss with kids varies depending on their developmental level. And you know, in education, we refer to that as DAP, developmentally appropriate practices. I also looked at this book. One, we need more books that expose children to other viewpoints and perspectives. Bottom line, we need more books that represent underrepresented groups. The number of books related to people and experiences in Arabic countries or the Middle East is minimal as far as in schools in general. And I want to highlight that because the fact that we have a book representing viewpoints from Arabic countries and Middle Eastern countries is, I feel, a very good thing and enormous. These are books that connect learning beyond ELA. So we're looking at, in this case, a book that connects to social studies, connects to human rights, connects to things. All good things. But then I go back to those, it is only a few pages, but those pages that to a reader that is 9 or 10 years old who hasn't been exposed to violence in TV shows, to movies, who reads in a sense that produces imagery in the head instead of just reading a word at a time. Many kids read that way, one word at a time. But for the ones who produce images in their head as they read, to come across that kind of image is difficult. And so my question then is there a way to provide a book that provides other viewpoints and perspectives, which I even went and pulled out the objectives and lessons for the unit, that gives those ways of thinking about how others perceive things, which, like I said, Ian, you do for me, which is amazing, and I love it, and I appreciate it so much. Or a book that provides representation for people from the Middle East that doesn't necessarily provide quite so graphic of an image, or even a way to so that students can read this book without necessarily having to read those portions. Is there a way that that can be provided? And my challenge then would be, we have an amazing curriculum team that does amazing work, that they would be able to do so. That I have full confidence and faith that you guys are incredible and would be able to do that, so that we are providing the good stuff without providing the trauma to students that would be traumatized. My every interaction with anyone from the curriculum team has been excellent and left me with a feeling of being overly impressed. And then even more so every future consecutive time that I interact. Does that need to be, like Emily said, looking at it again in order to reevaluate? How can we do that to provide the benefits that are there without the trauma? Does that make sense?
Have we had any reports of students that have been traumatized, and if so, how many? I'm just wondering how many out of the 5th grade students have we received more than?
If you recall, when we toured the elementary buildings, we specifically asked principals if they had had any comments. And I think out of our 8 elementaries, we had 2 that said they had a couple people say things. Others said they had heard nothing, that they were fine.
Okay.
So that's as much as we know.
Okay.
I did observe too, when we were at Central, there was a class that was reading about Malala. And Malala was attacked and targeted to be killed. And so that also is violent.
And I read that book also, to be fair, because I wanted to read all the books in the unit that I could get my hands on to give it a balanced perspective. And what was interesting about Malala's book is that she spoke about being attacked, but not in the sense of going through the details of the attack while she was experiencing it. It was not near, even though the violence was, or even though the overall her story included violence, it was presented in a way that you understood that violence had happened without the imagery being in your head as you were watching it. So you knew it, you knew the gravity of it without the imagery being so descriptive and so present.
Okay, but the bottom line really is, it's not our job to evaluate every piece of material that's used for curriculum. So for us to critique and analyze is beyond really our purvey.
Yet, according to the statement, the Board of Education shall provide instructional materials. The responsibility ultimately lies on us. And we trust those to make decisions, but ultimately, then it lies on us. I apologize, continue.
I appreciate the discussion. And I wasn't on the reconsideration committee, but I'm kind of coloring outside the lines, but I read it too.
Good.
I think a lot of us did. I wrote some comments, I've scratched some of them out, and I've added some others. I just felt it was important enough to try to get the wording right. But I'm going to support the motion, and I'm going to support the reconsideration committee's recommendation. The first two things I want to do is I want to thank members of the reconsideration committee for their work, and I want to thank Mrs. Schrader for raising the concern and for using the process. Some background, and I think it ties into some of the conversation here, but so our board delegates matters related to school operations to the superintendent, and we do it for good reason. These are complicated issues, and professional expertise is important. And Mark doesn't make these decisions alone. He involves others. He has processes. I see my role as a board member in cases like these is basically to be a backstop. It's to guard against any recommendation that could come to us or come down that I would see as clearly going beyond the general sensibilities of our community. So I reserve the right to weigh in. I do reserve the right to weigh in. I'm just saying the bar is set really high. And I'm saying in this case, I don't see an overstep. I don't see the bar being cleared in this instance. I would say this. I would ask our administrative team, okay, some more background. We've gone through a cycle of this being taught this fall. I suspect we're going to see a cycle of it going through next fall. I would say keep an open mind. Be open to feedback and be willing to second guess yourselves. And if you do change your mind, make the change. So anyway, but tonight I feel it's important. I feel that in my judgment, my role as a trustee is to support the reconsideration committee's recommendation.
I appreciate your thoughtfulness.
I'll weigh in here. There are 3 requirements to be a school board member. You got to be a registered voter, you have to be a U.S. citizen, and you got to be 18 years old. And in fact, some of us are a lot older than 18 years old. There's no requirement for board members to be educators, and I think that's one of the reasons board members are so torn here, because we're in a role now that we don't normally participate in. We have a superintendent who's charged with developing administrative guidelines for the selection of materials, instructional materials, and to provide a process for appealing the selection of those materials. And all these guidelines and processes are in place because of the policies that we have, and that's how boards operate through their policies, not on a whim. Pursuant to the policy, the board is required to provide funding for instructional materials, not to approve the instructional materials, but rather to provide the process, or to provide the funds to purchase them. A majority of this board approved the purchase of the new reading and writing curriculum, not the curriculum itself, after being informed at several meetings about the need for a new curriculum, the lengthy and prudent processes that were used to develop the curriculum recommendation, and the benefits of the new curriculum for our students. One of the main ones was explained to us is because it ties reading and writing together. And as was mentioned earlier, the board's primary role in these matters is oversight and on long-term student outcomes, not on the administrative or programmatic methods of getting there. The board's focus is on what's best for all students, not some students, and what's best for the community as a whole, not what's best for part of the community. Maybe some things could have been different on during the reconsideration process, but in general, I think it was handled properly. I don't think changes would have changed the outcome. I mean, I'm supporting the breadwinner as part of the 5th grade reading and writing curriculum. One of my major concerns here is we've never been put in this position before. Our policies are vague as they govern appeals to the board. We talked in policy committee about how to do this and really had no idea and thought we'd try this, you know. We've never reviewed these policies for the reason is that nothing like this has ever been brought to us. During this review process, we've learned that a number of boards do not entertain appeals like this, and that the appeals process stops with the findings of a reconsideration committee. And in my opinion, this is something we should consider, because I just think this puts us in a really difficult spot, and I don't think it's a spot we're necessarily qualified to be in. So, any other comments?
I will say I really respect what you just said. And that's one of the things I've been weighing back and forth, because I know we talked about moving forward with appeals processes on other types of appeals and how we would handle that, as whether the processes were handled appropriately. And right here, this is where I think we might need to clarify and solidify, and that's some work we can do about maybe what the committee should look like, what's the makeup of the committee, and maybe put that in some specifics. For me, why I say that, why I'll be voting against this amendment would be because I don't think that that review committee maybe was as, what's the right word do I say? Balanced as it could have been. And that's the reason why I think that we could give it the opportunity to be reconsidered to give that balance. I'm not saying that this book does not need to be a part of the curriculum. I want to be really clear on that. I'm saying I don't think that our reconsideration process was balanced enough to move forward with that decision. I personally don't like the book, but that's not what I'm basing all of this decision on.
Well, you have to remember too, Emily, that we approve operational policies. We don't approve administrative guidelines. We charge Mark with developing those guidelines.
Agreed.
And we're certainly not going to move into that arena, I don't believe, but I hear you. Any other comments from board members?
This is a hard, I think every one of us has battled ourselves internally with what the right process is in moving forward, because one, it's new, and two, our children are so important, and we all value our children, and whether they are ours personally or ours in that they attend the school district.
That's true. We're here to do what's best for kids.
Every person who has spoken from the heart and has been vulnerable in how you have spoken, and whether we have agreed completely or in part, we have listened respectfully, and thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly. Are there any other comments?
Call the question.
I think we should. All those in favor of denying the appeal and maintaining the breadwinner in the curriculum, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
I'll oppose just because, like Emily said, the process of redoing needs to be more, or the process needs to be clarified more. So I don't know if that should be an oppose or a abstain, but I think we need more clarification now that we've been through, and whether the committee reconsiders or whether that policies reconsider. I'd like to see it reconsidered, not necessarily removed, whether that reconsideration is in how it's handled with the curriculum or within the classroom, or whether it's how the communication with parents is handled. Something needs to adjust.
Okay, so you are voting no then, based on your comments?
I think so. Yes.
Okay.
Not approving, how's that?
Okay, so,
Yeah.
okay, thank you, Kimberly. So the motion passes 5-2. Thank you. Our next item is a discussion item, the Neola policy revisions. And that's on page, they start on, Mark's explanation starts on page 93.
Yeah, well, you have several policies that Neola is recommending that we make revisions to. The first bunch of these policies are primarily driven by the Office of Management and Budget, and we have reviewed not only this group, but all of the policies by our various departments and lead administrators, and they come to us from, after a review with legal counsel as well. So we've included all those policies in the board packet. The struck out portions are what we're proposing to be deleted. The green portions is what we're adding. So that, again, that first bunch is around office management and budget recommendations. The remainder of the policies that are in here deal with a variety of activities and issues. One is about including all of our athletic coaches, that they hold a valid certification in CPR and the use of AED machines beginning with next school year. There's some additional explanation about the use of Narcan in an existing policy for opioid antagonists. A revision to a policy to make sure that it includes the new requirement that we include a cardiac response plan in our district, and then updated requirements from the Michigan State Police around background checks. So pretty I mean, they're pretty routine. They do involve quite a few changes in the policies, but they are routine and not unexpected.
Who gained more understanding from Mark's memo than actually reading the policies?
Definitely.
That's a lot of paper, Mark.
Sure
It is, and the bulk of this fell on Paula and her staff to make sure, because
She did this to us?
She did this to us, yes.
You just got thrown under the bus.
A lot of it deals with federal funds and the administration of the grants, the grant monies that we get, and just some really kind of technical tweaks to our policies, but some that we have to abide by if we're going to receive federal funds.
I look forward to approving these in January, and I think it's appropriate that we assign board members to each policy to explain it to the rest of the...
Pass.
Anyway, with that, we've reached the end of our agenda. If board members could stick around to have a photo with Keith and Ian, that would be great. And we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.